Welcome to Plastic Model Mojo, a podcast dedicated to scale modeling, as well as the news and events around the hobby, where we hope to be informative and entertaining and help you keep your modeling mojo alive. Dave, we're back again. We're back for episode 79, and I hope we got a good one here.
Indeed we are.
Well, the Mike and Dave Spectacular last episode actually went over pretty well. So,
well, good.
We just never know when we don't have a guest how good a job we're actually doing. But some folks let us know.
Yes, they did.
Well, Dave, what is up in your model sphere?
Well, I am happy to report that the dark time this year has not been quite as dark. I've gone on endlessly about the time between Thanksgiving and the New Year and how little I get done. It's not been as bad. We'll catch up on that at the bench top, but I'm making progress. I've got an overall good feeling about my modeling. I'm in a good place. I'm not ecstatically overjoyed, 100% sunshine, but I'm in a place where I'm feeling decent about what I'm doing and where I am right now. So the only other thing is that model companies seem to be absolutely out to absolutely break my wallet. They are announcing stuff left and right.
Well, it's a Faves and Yawns episode, so I hope you got a few, because I sure do. It's gonna be a long one. We're gonna have to pull some time somewhere else to make up for it.
Well, that's my point exactly. I don't remember this time of year being as announcement heavy as it seems to be right now. And again, golden time in modeling. I think it's just we are as lucky as we could be. The simulation is doing everything it can to please us. How about you? What's your model sphere looking like?
Well, we talked last episode about, I guess the question was, do I want my computer next to my workbench? And what was I can't remember exactly what the context was. It was about time management, getting faster. Yeah. So
yes.
We'll talk a little bit about that more in the listener mail, but I actually did that. So my workshop, and I posted a picture on the dojo. It's not entirely different, but I've rearranged it. I'm kind of liking it, but not necessarily for the reasons that I thought moving it might make me like it, but just the general arrangement's better. But in that process, I was moving my display cabinet.
Oh, this hurts. I want to cry.
Well, it's interesting. It's not cry bad. I mean, I'll fix it, but it almost is. Folks may remember way back. I've told this story numerous times. I think I told it on Scale Model Podcast when I was the guest, the first time I was ever on any kind of podcast, ours or otherwise. That back in 2002 at AMPS, I'd built that SU-76 based off part of the Allen Hobbies kit.
Very little of the Allen Hobbies kit.
And a whole lot of blood, sweat, and tears. That model won a Golden Advanced. It won Best Russian. And it almost won Best of Show.
Right.
It was very close by all folks coming around after the show who judged and telling us.
Yep.
The elevator version of this story is the model that won was one that was using at that time all these avant-garde chipping and weathering techniques. And it was such a paradigm shift, it basically bummed me out, and I didn't build models much at all for a long time. So during my basement clean out I talked about last time, the old furnace room, I found some of the old plaques that I had, and I found that Best Russian 2002 amps. And so I put it back in the display case behind the model, leaned up against the back of the stinking display case.
Yeah.
Well, when I was sliding the display case across the floor, it one of the bottom edges caught I guess, the gap in the linoleum tiles down here. It's old school.
Yeah.
Foot square linoleum tiles on the floor. And it just bumped it enough to knock that plaque over, and it fell right on top of the SU-76 and did some pretty good damage to it. So
okay. I'm going to need a minute.
And on one hand, it's ironic that the model was outdone by the prize that it won. On the other hand, it's kind of metaphoric as to what actually happened after that show.
Yeah. Yeah, really. You could really read a lot into that.
So in all the introspection, I welled up to get pissed, and I was like, you know what? I'm not. I'm just going to fix this, touch it up, and I know what I did, and we just got to go forward. So that's what happened in my model sphere. I broke something. Probably broke the best model I've ever built to date.
Well, you know what? We have to mark that down for a future episode. We have to talk about what you do with finished kits, and do you display them? Do you give them away? How much do you care about them when they're done? That'd be an interesting topic for a future episode.
Especially somebody who accumulates them faster than we do.
Yeah, well, that's true. Well, we don't have a storage problem. Let's say that.
That's true.
So, Mike, I heard some ice clinking. I'm assuming that means there is a modeling fluid.
Yeah, I was enjoying that Russell's Reserve 10-year, so I've picked up a bottle of Bullet 10-year for comparison. And, the Bullet 10-year is good. We'll talk a little bit more about it at the end, but I'm kind of enjoying that.
Well, good. Well, and I'm steering a slightly different course. In honor of our friend and fellow Septemberist, John Vitkus, who, whenever we have one of our video get-togethers, is always drinking a fine wine. Tonight, instead of a bourbon or a beer, I have a Coppola 2019 Cabernet Sauvignon, 14.5% alcohol by volume. And I don't normally drink wines. When I do drink wines, it's almost exclusively red wines. I think the only other wine I've had as a modeling fluid in all 79 episodes might have been the 19 Crimes Snoop Dogg Cali Red. So this will be an interesting comparison when we get to the end. But John, I'm joining you in having a fine glass of wine.
Well, we need to join all these folks who've sent listener mail in the last 2 weeks.
All right, let's get to it.
Oh yeah, we got to, because we got a healthy amount.
Good.
A lot of repeats, but we don't care.
Yep.
We got a lot of folks writing in and interacting with us. And one of those repeats would be Mr. David Waples.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he's got a Colorado area code. I don't know if that's really where he's from or not.
Yeah, these days, it used to be you could tell. These days, with people keeping their cell phone numbers and moving around the country, you never know.
Anyway, he said he enjoyed episode 77 while putting up his outdoor Christmas lights and decorations. Well, 77 was Dr. Strangebrush and our Clear Parts one.
Yeah.
Clear Parts episode. And he's got a tip.
Which is?
Glass files. Not files for filing glass, but rather files made of glass.
Right. I have seen these.
Now, he thinks they're etched somehow, and they probably are.
Yeah.
Or cut maybe as well. But anyway, he says Infinity sells some.
Yeah.
But he got some that were geared toward the fingernail industry.
Yep.
Less expensive. He got 8 of these. I don't know if it's a set or if it's 8 duplicates, but for $10 off Amazon. So.
Yep. You can also go into like Joanne Beauty Supply, and they have glass files.
Great for filing off the nubs that we were talking about. And best part is they leave a polished finish.
Huh. I had never thought of that part of it.
Me either. I never knew the thing existed.
Oh yeah, I've seen them, and they've been around, and that's always one thing that's interested me that we've mentioned when talking with Evan once or twice. When you watch Evan's videos, when I cut something off the sprue and there's a nub that I need to sand down, I use a sanding stick, whereas Evan uses a metal file, and I've just that's just such a different approach. And the glass file is probably somewhere in between the two.
Well, but he'll buy 8,000 sets of 3D printed tracks and won't buy any new tools.
Yeah. Well, that's still better than Night Shift, who up until recently was cutting stuff off the sprue with nail scissors. That just hurt me every time I watched it.
Up next, Ray LeGrant from Ware, Massachusetts. I guess he just wants our take on some cyber etiquette.
Okay.
We've all got all the podcasts have these groups and et cetera now. And
yep,
we're all in forums and Facebook groups. He was told it's very, very impolite to post a photo of your own model, especially if you built the same kit, in the comment section of somebody else's post. And it's like saying, yeah, I did it too, and mine's better.
I have actually encountered this complaint once or twice, and I'll be honest with you. I don't, unless somebody says something when they post the photo of their build of the kit, something that's snarky or offensive or that, just posting a photo of you having built the same kit, I don't see how that's offensive. I mean, this isn't something we're getting social credit scores for. It just...
Well, some people think we are.
Yeah, okay, sadly, yeah. In general, I always view that as, or at least I've always, when it's happened in something I've posted, I've always viewed that positively as, hey, I built this too. And, there's usually a comment like, yeah, I found this part tough too, or, something relating back to what the original post or poster said accompanying their model. I've heard there are people who don't think that that's a polite thing to do. I don't quite understand why, and I don't think there's a problem doing it, as long as, like I said, any accompanying text with the photo is not a ha ha ha, I did it better than you, or, I didn't have any of the problems you had, or whatever. But, just saying, yeah, great build. I did I built that same kit. I really enjoyed it. And put a picture up. I don't see how that's really offensive.
Yeah, I guess it gets down to the interpretation of the original poster.
Yes. Yeah.
And their intent of posting their model within their own brain. I don't know. You can't be clairvoyant. But he does qualify this a little bit more. He says he's seen it done a lot where a builder will post a single photo and then somebody will photo bomb their own in the comment section.
Yeah, that's probably that I will agree with. If somebody posts, 9 or 10 pictures of a build they just completed, posting a single photo along with a helpful or positive comment, yeah. Somebody posts one photo of a build they just completed and you post 25 in the comments. That's just overboard, just not from an offensive standpoint. It's just overboard. If you're tagging into somebody else's post, commenting on it, a single photo is sufficient. This is their spotlight and you're just commenting on it.
Yep. Interesting question. Let's keep going, man.
You got it.
This one's interesting because we can have a little bit follow on with, I think, a different listener, but Chris DeYoung's back.
Mm-hmm.
And he said he had a small history with Three Floyds. 15 years ago or so, he ordered a shirt from their online shop and never received it even after multiple emails and calls unanswered.
Oh, no.
He vowed to boycott their beer, but broke down the last time he was in Chicago because he saw their Barbarian Haze and just had to pick up a 6-pack.
Oh, I don't blame him. The box wins you over.
And Chris is in Jacksonville, Florida. Now, he's not the person who you've got something. Maybe we'll save it till.
No, he is not the person that DM'd me on Facebook.
We'll get to yours in a minute.
Yes, we will.
Moving along, Dave.
Okay.
Mark Dramus out on the West Coast with Jim and all those guys. Dr. Strangebrush comments.
Okay.
Says he's pretty sure his doctorate's in chemistry or something like that, but Might actually be marketing.
It's funny because Dr. Strangebrush doesn't think he does a very good job of marketing. And Jim and I and other people are always giving him suggestions, remarketing. His degree is some sort of biology, chemical engineer, something in that field. And I can't, or it's a hard science, and I don't know what it is. He's told me once, but that was probably in a hotel room in Vegas or Omaha. Well, no, it wasn't in Omaha because he didn't make it, but probably in a hotel room in Vegas or sitting in a microbrewery somewhere. Yeah, that particular information has been lost. I'll ask him.
Well, Mark's one of several who come back after those episodes and talk about the money they've spent and the kind service and private messages, personal messages they've gotten in their boxes.
Yeah.
Doing business with Mr. Miller. So we're glad to hear it.
Yes. And he is a great guy. Again, I can't sing his praises high enough.
Here's a good one. Ken Cox from Las Vegas, Nevada.
Okay.
He's wondering if we have any insight into what goes into what models go in and out of production. And says he's been listening with envy about your Kate getting crossing the finish line because he's been looking at the N1 and N2 Kates for a while now.
Yeah.
And he says the current eBay prices are kind of ugly.
Yeah.
And, Hobby Link Japan has one for $12, but, by the time you pay the $45 shipping to get it, you're right there at the eBay price. So
go to a contest. I picked up one in Cincinnati for $10. So you don't have to pay. eBay does tend to be pricey.
Well, you get the speculators on there who
exactly
they got their finger on the pulse of what's in the current lineup and
right.
And they're scalping essentially.
Yes, essentially. If I knew what I have a big interest in the business side of the hobby, the back end of the hobby, and how it's decided what kit is produced. These companies that are apparently doing CADs and then selling to multiple companies their CAD renders of a particular vehicle, like a Stug or a Panther or whatever. Just all of that interests me greatly. I would love to know what the decision making is regarding when a company brings an old kit back into the lineup for further production. I've wondered if those companies monitor eBay and look at the prices, and when the price gets high enough, they re-release the kit on another run and maybe bump the price $1 or $2, and they're still making out like bandits. I don't know. And man, there are some, the one that was for the longest time the great mystery was the Hasegawa SBD, which would come into release once every 15 years for 5 seconds. And boy, you better grab one when they were released. It was the only SBD worth building on the market. Now Flyhawk has come out and done their beautiful kit. So the Hasegawa SBD mystery is not as big and as interesting as it was. But man, that was a kit where it just seemed like Hasegawa had little or no interest in having it in their lineup on any sort of regular basis. Maybe they're holding a grudge from Midway. I don't know. But that is the premium example of a kit that there was demand for well beyond what was being when Hasegawa would bring it back into their lineup. So no, I don't have any insight. I wish I did. If there's somebody out there in the industry who does have insight, I'd love to hear what information you have, because some of those are a mystery to me too.
Well, and just generally, this is just injection molding in general. They only have so much capacity,
right?
That their business model will allow them have, whether they do their molding in house or if it's at a mold shop. They only have so much capacity they can pay for. They're always trying to have new stuff so they can stay relevant.
Right.
So
some
of the stuff has to roll off the back end.
Yeah.
Until, I don't know. That's a good question. What makes the ones that come back? Now, I've noticed a lot of the Hozzy kits are getting boxed by somebody.
Hobby 2000.
And you got somebody, a third party like that, who's putting up who's buying the sprues in the bag, I guess, or however they're boxing them.
Either that or they're renting the molds themselves. Now, that was something that used to be done. I don't know how much it happens anymore, but back in the 80s, molds used to get rented. Well, in fact, the Itoleri Tamiya crossover, it is to this day unclear to me. Does Itoleri mold the molds and send the sprues to
I'm
Tamiya?
Sure they do. There's no way that the freaking tooling's crossing the ocean back and forth.
I'm not 100% sure of that, especially with the Japanese tolerances. If you've ever looked at a Tamiya kit of an Itoleri,
but there's only so much they can do to affect that in somebody else's tooling.
That's true. But
so I think Itoleri is sending them over there in bulk, packaged kits with no boxes, and Tamiya's putting their own box on it.
It may well be, but I would love to know.
That'd be the typical OEM arrangement, something like that. Now, Ken does mention he's got 3 kits here he'd like to see something happen with.
Okay.
2 of them are Hassi's, Hasegawa F111 series.
Yep. It hasn't been out in a long time.
And there's not a whole lot of other options there.
Yes, that's absolutely true.
Now, the Hasegawa FW190 series is probably not going to see much light.
Right.
Yeah, go for it.
Given the Edward kit.
No, it's the 72nd scale.
Yeah, the 72nd scale Edward Aquawolf 190 is, frankly, the current best on the market.
But somebody just released a series.
Oh, the 190Ds, the long nose, long body 190Ds, IBG, just released those, and those are amazing kits. I've got one. In fact, we were talking with Steve Hustad, and he has one of those, and we were talking about the fidelity of that kit. So, yeah, I can see why something like a Hasegawa Focke-Wulf 190D or regular 190 or their 190D those molds might not come back into production for a long time just because they've been superseded. True.
And his final one's the fine molds BF109.
I don't know what the current they're out there. They're out there. They are still out there. I don't know how the fine mold stuff. I don't know how their production runs, but they are slightly unusual in some form or fashion. At the 2010 or 2012 Nationals, I got to talk with the guy from Hobby Link Japan, and he knows the fine molds people, and the fine molds has some sort of relationship with Hasegawa. And I don't remember, again, I've gotten old. It was 10 years ago. I don't remember the exact details of the relationship, but I think there is some interdependence or something between the two companies. So that may affect how often fine molds re-releases some of their molds.
All right. That's a good question.
Mm-hmm.
No, I'm not sure if we answered it. We sure ran our mouths.
Well, I don't think we know. I don't think we know, but I would love to, again, I've got a big interest in that end of the hobby. So if there are folks out there who have some insight into it, reach out and let us know.
Tim Holland. Now, Tim's from Maryland there with the Model Geeks guys.
Yep.
His model room, well, it's computer in the hobby room.
Yeah.
His model room is a 12 by 14 room in a finished basement, and the basement's all his. Sounds like my arrangement.
Yeah.
And yours, for the most part.
For the most part.
He's got an L-shaped kitchen counter in the room, and a paint booth to one side, and workstations on the counters to the other side. He's got his computer workstation 3 modeling stations. He can slide his chair around,
Yeah.
Typical jazz, right?
And he's still modeling on an 8.5 by 11-inch square on the bench with all the clutter around him. If he's anything like me and you and most modelers.
But he's got his up there, his computer, so he can record videos, type up comments for a blog or listen to podcasts, etc. So I'd mentioned before, I'd talk about this a little bit more. That was the one thing when I was like putting my computer like away from my workbench. I'm like, we have these build nights with Canadians. How am I going to do that?
Yeah.
I'm going to move everything just for one night on an odd weekend.
What you need to do is get a rolly cart where you can roll it in and roll it out.
I guess so. Computer out of the hobby room. I think I'm going to say that's not for me. I'm just going to figure out a better way to manage my time.
Yeah. A discipline rather than physical arrangement. If you can discipline yourself, and again, I'm a lawyer. We procrastinate by our very nature. So that type of discipline is really hard. But one of my 2023 New Year's resolutions is getting much better at time management and not wasting time.
That's it.
All right.
Up next, Zach Peace, Mansfield Center, Connecticut. And as an aside, he says Evans should get the $6 Million Man reference because it's in syndication. Your main topic struck a chord, especially Mike's discussion on glory hunting. That's, I appreciate that. He says he doesn't model to compete, but he's competitive by nature, so he has to be careful himself.
Yeah.
And if he goes to a show, he just has to keep that in check.
Yep.
And he's had some models place at, more shows than he hasn't, and a few he's been to. He's new to the shows, he says again. And he said that probably doesn't help with the setting expectations. He thinks he's hard on himself regarding the own quality of models, but he finds shows difficult because of his competitive side. He likes the open judging system. He finds that more palatable, but that's probably a whole other discussion.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. That's an entirely other discussion, and a good one to have, but not tonight.
It does bring up, what he mentions does bring up something else that I think is true. Nearly every modeler that I've personally known who goes to contests and starts entering models goes through a phase where it really matters to them, what the results really matter to them, and they start caring too much about the results. Now, almost everybody I know who's gone through that comes out the other side, where all of a sudden they realize that it's a piece of wood or a round metal and nothing more than that, and really doesn't say anything too important about you or your skill or your abilities compared to other people, especially since so much of judging is subjective. But I do think most people who build and then start entering pass through a phase like that.
Next is Jason Campbell from Knoxville, Tennessee. He's from the Knoxville, Tennessee IPMS group down there. And he's also one of the admins at the Knoxville, East Tennessee area Gundam modeling group. I assume that's a Facebook group.
Cool.
And he wanted to clarify one thing, a minor correction.
Okay.
About the Gundam models.
Yep.
At the show. I assume he's talking about the Knoxville show.
Mm-hmm. Or the one you attended?
No, not that one.
Okay.
Not all the models entered in the Gundam category from their local group. He says they reached out to the Middle Tennessee group to see if some of their members want to show up, and they did. They brought up a multiple of kits in addition to the 11 kits that were entered by the Knoxville area builders. So there's already talks for the Middle Tennessee group to attend the Chattanooga show in January.
Mm-hmm.
And the Middle Tennessee group and the folks in East Tennessee have reached out to most of the Gundam groups, have reached out to the Gundam groups in North Alabama and North Georgia about possibly attending as well. So there's a little synergy going on there between some of these Gundam groups and some of the IPMS chapters.
Yep. I think there is, and I've said this before, there is a lot of energy in a lot of these Gundam building groups. A lot of them tend to skew a little bit younger than modelers in the traditional categories, aircraft, armor, etc. That youthful energy, I think, is a useful injection into any hobby, any IPMS club, any modeling group that has up to now been more focused on the more traditional subjects. And there's a lot of, I can tell you from our own group, the Military Modelers Club of Louisville, these folks who've come in who that's their major subject area, really, I mean, they've got, not only can they learn from us, but they've got stuff to teach us. In any modeling genre, there's some things that one genre is doing that can be applied to others. Just like I think right in the last 10, 15 years, there has been a ton of crossover between armor and aircraft modeling. Particularly as it applies to weathering and finishing. And so I think the same thing applies with Gundams. And I am more than thrilled to see these guys and gals not only building, but starting to attend IPMS club contests and attend IPMS clubs themselves and their meetings. So they've got a lot to give. And if you're a member of a club and these guys show up, be welcoming to them, because they have stuff to contribute.
Well, my last one is from the usual last one. It's Michael Karnaka from New York City.
Question of the day.
That's right. If there was one accessory, decal sheet, or kit that, if it was available, would greatly aid in finishing a project you've always had in mind for a while, what would it be? For him, it's the Thunder Model Morris C9B Bofors gun truck that's been announced, and would fill a major gap in his collection if it's ever released. But he wants to know what we've pined for over the years. It's still not there. That would move. Let's say it will move it to the top of the build list.
Okay, I can answer that question. The one for me is a Privateer, a new mold Privateer. The only available one's the old Matchbox one, which is not an awful kit, but it is an old Matchbox kit with all those challenges. And while I really want a Privateer, because there's a particular encounter that I want to build, a Privateer and a particular Japanese aircraft from a particular moment in history. So that would aid me greatly in realizing that goal. But, all I can do is cross my fingers and hope that it eventually happens. In the meantime, I've got tons of recently released kits that I can build, and I'm not hurting for subjects or items to build. So here's to hoping it's a Privateer. How about you, Mike?
Well, I got an idea for you.
Okay.
You could do it as a box diorama, and you could only build the Privateer, everything north from just south of the waist gun windows, and use a B-24.
Well, keep in mind the PB4Y2, the Privateer that I want to do, has the large single tail.
Right. But if you don't have to model the tail.
Yes, you're well, there's still they had waist gun blisters. There are more significant differences, but I could take part of the old Matchbox kit and build just enough of it to be in a box diorama. But no, I'm not going to do that. I'm just counting that since I got my KI-21 from ICM, that God listens to my prayers, and he's eventually going to have some model company releasing a Privateer.
Well, for me, it's an aftermarket item that came and went, and I don't remember who made it. So hopefully this gives me the opportunity to at least solve that mystery. Because it's not even on ScaleMates.
Really? Well, that must have come and gone quickly.
Someone at one time made an aftermarket turret and launcher for the Panzerwerfer 42. You know, it's either on the SWS tractor or
Right.
the Opel Maltier.
Right.
Well, I want to do the Maltier version. And I've got so much other aftermarket. I could probably cobble together something that probably at this point is better than what this thing was. But this was a resin and PE and brass barreled thing. And I can't remember who made it, but it was available from somebody.
For like 10 seconds.
For 10 seconds. And I think it's the one that is on the build in Chris Morosco's old book.
Yeah.
There's an SWS version of the Panzerwerfer in there that's got this thing. It's unpainted. The model's unpainted.
Right.
And it's brass barrels and all this stuff. And I'm like, man, who made that thing?
Okay, listeners, that's your challenge. I know that somebody out there knows of the kit, the aftermarket piece that Mike is talking about. And if you're the first person to email Mike and tell him the name of the company, we'll get you some sort of reward. I don't know what it is, but somebody's going to identify who made that, when it was available, and who knows, maybe once he knows that, he can find it on eBay.
Or it's a false memory.
Oh, that's true. It could be
Chris could have cabbaged it from some resin kit that the rest of the kit sucked and used an Italeri SWS. I don't know.
So, well, if you're out there and you know the answer to that, please email Mike. We'll get you some sort of reward.
Well, that's all that's come into the email address, Dave. What do you got?
Facebook Messenger has been alive and kicking. And it actually has kind of a Three Floyds focus. So we're getting a lot of Three Floyds content in here this time. Chris Doppler, who lives up in Northwest Indiana, which of course is near where Three Floyds is located in Munster. He was in his local Meijer and in the beer section, and they had a display of several different of the Three Floyds six-packs cartons. And so he just wanted us to know, sent us a picture of it and wanted us to know that they were available in the Meijers up there. So, which makes perfect sense because it's a hop, skip, and a jump over to where the stuff is actually made. More on the Three Floyds front, Jeff Adair has accomplished something that I have not been able to accomplish. He got some of the folks from Three Floyds to actually talk to him or at least message him. I don't know if it was on Twitter or it was on Facebook Messenger or what, but he actually had a brief conversation with the folks at Three Floyds and got confirmation that apparently several of the folks involved are indeed modelers, which goes a long way to explaining the faux Tamiya and faux Revell boxes that they've done. On that same subject, I have actually talked to the folks at Three Floyds and gotten the name of the illustrator who has created those boxings, and I'm reaching out hoping to interact with that individual because I've got questions. So we'll see if that works out. David Mason up in Michigan reached out to let us know that the Mid-Michigan Modelers are putting on a contest on February 4th, 2023. They extended an invitation to come up and go to the contest and drink modeling fluid. And while I'm not sure we can make it this year, we do. Mike and our eyes are bigger than our stomachs as far as the number of contests we'd like to get to this year. And he and I have been talking. We've got to sit down with the calendar and start making some choices, and also getting clearance from our better halves who are not going to tolerate us being gone to a model contest every weekend of the year. That's
probably not.
That's just not happening. In fact, I'm having I'm going to pay a heavy price this year to get to the Nationals because the model wife's birthday is August 1st. And that will be a travel day for Mike and I to get down to San Marcos. So she knows it's coming, and she's already let me know there's going to be a heavy price to get that to be gone that particular day.
But
so,
there is a price.
There is a price. We've already established it. Finally, Zahn Sullenberger, modeler who's on the Big Island in Hawaii. He's an IPMS USA member, and he's not affiliated with a club, but he took my suggestion and reached out to the IPMS USA director of local chapters and regional coordinator, see if he can locate a club that the guy can affiliate with and can start attending meetings. Because again, this hobby can be solitary, but some of the best parts of it are interactions with fellow modelers. And again, the best parts of the national and best parts of regional and local contests. You know, I enjoy all of the modeling stuff. I enjoy all of that. But the best part by far is the face-to-face interaction with other modelers. So if you're not going to contests, you need to do it. If you're not a member of a local chapter, try and find one near you. And if you can't find one near you, maybe you can start one, and IPMS USA will help you locate other individual modelers in your area.
If you want to talk to us, drop us a note. You can do so by using Facebook Messenger system. Dave usually handles those. Unless it's armor related, then you might pass it off to me, or I might answer if I see it first.
That's right. Especially if it's Stug or T-34 related.
Or you can send us an email to plasticmodelmojo@gmail.com, and that's it for listener mail.
All right. I'd like to take a moment to ask you, when you're done with listening to this episode, to please go and rate us on whatever podcast app you use to listen. It really helps us. And also, if you have a modeling friend that's not listening to our podcast, please recommend us. Please assist them to get a podcast listening app downloaded on their phone so that they can listen. The recommendation of a current listener is the best way for us to continue to grow our audience.
Lots of other podcasts out there, Dave, and folks can check them out after they've checked us out by going to www.modelpodcast.com. That's Model Podcast plural. It's a website set up by Stuart Clark at the Scale Model Podcast at our bequest to provide banner links to all the other podcasts who are choosing to participate in this mutual cross promotion. Again, that's www.modelpodcast.com. If you like to get into other stuff like YouTube and blogs, we got plenty of those we like to follow too. Inch Eye Guy, Jeff Groves up in Indiana, has got a wonderful blog on all things 72nd scale. You want to check that out if you're a fan of that scale. Chris Wallace, model airplane maker, great blog and a YouTube channel. It's really starting to take off. So please check out Chris's YouTube channel and his blog. Sprue Pie with Frets, our friend Stephen Lee. I think he's in the DC area. I don't know if that's right or not, but lots of good and interesting content, long and short form. So please check that out as well. And can't forget Jim Bates, Scale Canadian TV over on YouTube. And of course, Evan McCallum, Panzermeister 36. But we'll probably hear from him again in the new year pretty early. I got a feeling.
Absolutely. Finally, I'm not going to belabor the point. If you're not a member of your national IPMS chapter, be that IPMS USA, IPMS Canada, etc., please join. We've already mentioned previously IPMS and some of the things that they can do to assist modelers. So please join.
All right, Dave, let's have a word from our sponsor. Plastic Model Mojo is now brought to you by Model Paint Solutions, your source for Harder Steenbeck airbrushes, David Union power tools, and laboratory-grade mixing, measuring, and storage tools for use with all your model paints, be they acrylic, enamels, or lacquers. Check them out at www.modelpaintsolutions.com. Come and make it in Texas, Dave.
I cannot wait for this summer, man.
Well, you're going to have to wait a little bit. At the time of this recording, Dave, it is 232 days away from the IPMS National Convention in San Marcos, Texas.
It'll be here before you know it.
It will, and I think the dark times have hit our special agent 003. I guess on his Thanksgiving travels, he dropped in on the embassy suites there in San Marcos.
Yep.
Now, I think from the photos I've seen online, it's highly similar to the one in Omaha, maybe not quite as big.
Yeah.
But architecturally and decor-wise, it looked almost indistinguishable. But he says it looks first-rate. Restaurants on site, bar on site, etc. What you would expect in a convention hotel, and thinks we should enjoy it. Now he's going to smoke out the other local haunts and possibly some other hotels going forward. But for right now, he thinks folks staying at the convention hotel will be pleased. So I can't imagine we won't be.
Yeah, I was going to say, at this point, give me a cardboard box. I'd be happy to. Again, it's the best 4 days of the year. So, you know. And I have no doubt the hotel is going to be nice. That is one thing, one of the many things when IPMS USA's e-board is looking at competing bids. One of the things that they do look at very hard is the convention hotel or hotels. So, yeah, they make an effort to make sure the hotels are up to par.
Well, good. So, Brandon, look forward to your next update, and we got to get him on for Winter Blitz too. I want to give him a spot to talk about that online on air. So, I'll have to get in touch with Brandon. So, Cool deal.
Sounds great.
Well, up next, Dave, is the Benchtop Halftime Report brought to us by Tackett Z. You can go to tacketzz.com and see what Ed's got cooking up, and hopefully that FlexiFile case will get a revision and be available soon.
Definitely, because I want that.
Might have to poke him and see what's going on.
I'll do that.
So check it out, tacketzz.com, if you need some accessories for your workbench organization, and Ed will fix you right up. All right, Dave, what is on Dave's bench?
Two things. One, the Kate is at the finish line. I am matte coating it, and then the only thing left to do is to take off the canopy masking and to do the AK pencil weathering. I did a panel line wash and I did some marbling and some other stuff, but a lot of the weathering I'm going to do, which is actually going to be fairly restrained because these aircraft were not well worn prior to the attack on Pearl Harbor. So it's going to be restrained, but the vast majority of the weathering is going to be using these AK pencils. I really think that they're good. I really think that they have a lot of flexibility, a lot of forgiveness, to the point where I want to get good with them. And the thing that I've got to battle here is that when I get to this point in the build, I don't want to mess it up, so I tend to hold back and not make the efforts that I should make to finish the model off boldly. And I'm going to try and fight that in finishing this model. So it is possible by this weekend I may be posting pictures of the finished model. So fingers crossed. The other thing that's happening on my bench is, as you know, I've got the Musaru build coming up that I've got to finish by the end of March. That's the Arma P51. I've been posting pictures because I do think that there is a virtue in taking a model and breaking it into sub-assemblies when you can to basically make a model of little models. I think that you can be very successful by, say, if your aircraft is a radial engine aircraft, focusing on the radial engine and modeling that. What I've been doing with the Arma P51 was the propeller is a nose cone, self-contained unit. You can model that separately from the rest of the aircraft and then just pop it on at the end. I've been doing that. I've been working on that and trying some new things, one of which was using pink as an undercoat before laying down yellow on the prop tips. It worked out really well. A number of people have told us that technique works. I've never tried it before. I was a little bit skeptical. I tried it. It worked exactly as advertised, and now I have another bullet in my holster of modeling skills, and I'm going to use that again at some point in the future. I can guarantee you, in fact, probably again and again, given the frequency that you have to paint something yellow eventually. So how about your bench?
I've been dabbling in lots of stuff. I'm still plucking away at these Tankcraft tracks for the KV85 project.
So how are they assembly-wise? Are they compare them to, say, the old classic Fruel or whatever?
What's the old classic Fruel? The really old ones that had the crab claws you pinch together?
Well, there's that, and then the ones with the copper wire that you make your own pins.
These are better than the wire pin ones, in my opinion.
Okay.
Because you end up with the whole side of the pin and the outboard side of the pin are detailed correctly.
Okay.
It's not just a wire sticking out of a hole.
Right.
Now, some people would go around and glue little nut, bolt, and washer castings on the end of all those to if you want to do that to enhance the Fruel tracks.
And then cover it with mud.
Yeah. You know, and all this aftermarket track, the original Fruels that didn't use the wires, that had the pin molded in.
Yeah.
And you just crimp the other link on it.
Yeah.
Those were by far the easiest single link tracks to assemble ever.
Yeah.
Bar maybe some snap together ones like in Tamiya's Sharby one. But they had a tendency to come apart on you.
At an inconvenient time, usually.
Yeah, well, exactly. Oh, no, I like them. The manner in which I got these via Scott from Tankcraft, full disclosure, I didn't pay for them. I owe them some feedback and to do that publicly, and it's going to be good. So I just need to get to a point where I've got something to show and can make my case and have it make sense. So when you're modeling with those particular tracks, how long does it take you to do how many links? I've started, I put together 50 over a few days, just here and there. But since then I've been doing 10 link segments.
Gotcha.
And I can do the 10 link segment in about, 20 minutes maybe.
That's not bad.
It's not bad. And that's even putting a dab of super glue on the inside of the pinheads so they don't come out. But I like them. I'm trying to think through how I'm going to paint them, because that's the one. If there's a disadvantage to plastic or resin tracks, is that you can't do the burnished metal and file off the paint off the high points kind of thing. You gotta come up with something different. So I've got to come up with a good plan to get the worn metallic look on these things, because I don't have any metal to work with.
Well, that shouldn't be too hard, I wouldn't think.
I got a couple ideas. I think I can use different paint formulations to make it work the way I want it to.
Another thing you might take a look at is the AK pencils.
Yeah, that sounds time consuming though.
It's actually not. From my limited experience, and admittedly, I have limited experience. I think that you could burnish up a set of tracks really fairly quickly.
Yeah, maybe.
So what else other than the tracks?
I'm trying to get the catapult painted on the E16. Last episode, I was struggling with getting the shading off, particularly the top deck of the catapult, because I have, if you're sitting in the cockpit of the plane, the left or the right side of the catapult, vertical side of the catapult's glued to the deck and the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got like a 3-sided box, a channel.
Right.
The fourth side is left off so I can put the firing mechanism in and rig the thing.
Right.
Well, I started painting it without that left side on it, and I was getting highlight paint in an area that I didn't want it.
That you wanted shadow.
That I wanted shadow. So now I've got to go back, and I've got this thing taped up strategically so I can paint this thing and get the shadows where I want them and the highlights where I want them. And I'm anxious to get the base coat on it so I can start weathering it. I had so much fun with the launch mechanism that I'm really, really excited to get rolling on the rest of the catapult.
And I was going to say, I think that thing just has, especially between rust streaking and chipping and oil staining and all, it's almost an armor project.
Yeah, it is. You're right.
From that standpoint, it has all of those potentials.
Kind of like a tow truck.
Yeah, exactly.
And I guess I've also been doing some virtual modeling. I've been back on Fusion 360, messing around with the Reba Botan.
Yeah. So how is your new hobby going?
Not so much. There's some of what you're saying is true, but
I'm teasing you, and you know it.
I'm because of the printer I got. I'm not in the nuance of 3D printing. I just plug it in and it works. That's the hobby I didn't want.
Yeah.
The CAD and stuff I don't mind because I was doing that for crap anyway. I mean, I used CAD for the E16 dive brakes.
Yeah, exactly. Well, what I was going to say is, given the fact that what you do for a living, every bit of what you do in CAD for your hobby also at least sharpens your skill for your day job.
Yeah, or the other way around.
Or right, exactly. It works both ways. So, I mean, it's killing two birds with one stone is what I'm saying.
So I kind of got three things going on.
Yeah.
I mean, the printer's running right now as we record. I'm printing something that's one more test before I get a little deeper into the design work.
Yeah.
And I'm about out of resin that came with the printer from the guy I bought it from. So I'm going to have to spend some more money here soon. So that's the way that works. Well, you got anything else on your bench or?
No, that's about it.
See what we get done the next 2 weeks, Dave.
You got it.
Hello, Mojovians. This is Chris from Inside the Armour Publications, and I'm here to tell you all about Models for Ukraine Volume 2. The first volume of Models for Ukraine raised money for humanitarian aid for Ukraine by featuring only Ukrainian manufacturers made by some of the best modelers around the world. Why mess with a good formula? Volume 2 features much of the same. This time, though, all of the articles will be new and feature such great artists as Calvin Tan, Ken Abrams, Sam Dwyer, Rene van der Hart, Vance Lubin, Robert Blocker, and many more. All in all, 23 artists in 11 countries have donated their work for free to what we think is a fantastic modelling book that also happens to raise a lot of money for a good cause. If you'd like to purchase this fantastic book, please head on over to InsideTheArmour.com to get yours today. Also, if you'd like to know more about the model manufacturers of Ukraine, please look up Models from Ukraine podcast to hear the latest interviews with people like ResKit, Wingsy Kits, Armory, and many of the other Ukrainian manufacturers. A special thank you to Mike and Dave. Raise your glass of modelling fluid and let's get back to the plastic model mojo.
Always a worthy cause. Mike, have you been monitoring what's been released or announced to be released in the last 30 days or so?
I have, probably longer than 30 days. We haven't done this in a while.
I know.
I got a pretty good list, and I tell you, unfortunately, some of it's going to have to wait till this war's over.
Well, I have trimmed my list down because of the fact that there were, again, I don't know if it's all the hobby manufacturers have gotten together and decided that they're going to break me financially or what, or it's just that we live in the golden age of modeling, but faves and yawns, I trimmed mine down to 3, but it was tough doing that. And I could have added 5 or 6 more easily. So, Mike, do you have a fave or a yawn?
Well, let's get the Russian ones out of the way first. I'll do 2 at once because I've got several. I've got that Katyusha project all boxed up and ready to go.
Yep.
I've got 3 kits to kit bash and make that work. Well, now Quinta Studios has come out with in their 3D decal series.
Yep.
They've got a set for the Zis 5.
I know. I saw that and immediately thought of you.
So that's interesting. And then kind of based on my last completed model, my Zis 2 anti-tank gun, there's a company, another Russian company, Scale 3D. So this is printed stuff.
Yeah.
They have 3 sets. One is a set of Zis2 wheels, which is, Husar makes those, and probably somebody else does too. Not that one's not so interesting, but they also make a set to convert the gun back to the early. The Zis2 was in production, then they took it out of production, and they brought it back. So this is the kind of early war, pre-war version of the gun that had the riveted square split trail.
Yeah.
And the shield shape was a little different, and the gun breech was different. But they make a set for that, and they also make a set, it's a little bit smaller set, to do the last version of the gun, which was the very late war one that went into the post-war. So interesting stuff. I may be curious what these companies kick out going forward. Now, I'm not going to build another Zis2. I just thought those were really neat, especially the early version. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Well, what do you got?
Well, I'm going to start with a yawn, and it's only a yawn thanks to you. Recently, a company called Beaver Corporation announced several figure sets, some with equipment, some with not, of Japanese World War II, Imperial Japanese Navy and Imperial Japanese Army figures for, aircraft dioramas, ground crew, armorers, etc. And I am telling you, from the advertisement, I would have bit so hard on these, it's not funny. The only reason it's a yawn for me is that Mike took a bullet for me, and he ordered a set of them, and given his input on their quality, I'm going to pass. But man, if these things had been done by somebody who was doing good quality stuff, I'd be so all over it. It's not funny.
Yeah, I've got a set of Imperial Japanese Navy ground crew, or deck crew, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And the pilots. Now, the pilots aren't too bad. It's not that the quality's bad. It's just the execution's bad. There's just so much more refined and better sculpts out there.
Yeah.
These are almost 72nd scale crash test dummies. They're really rudimentary.
Yeah. And that's the problem with all these, with 3D printing and all of that. You got all these companies coming into the 72nd scale figure space, and you're never going to know what the quality is until you either see them, or until a modeling buddy takes the bullet for you and orders them and determines that no, despite the advertising, it's the quality just isn't what you'd want it to be.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll do a fave and yawn together because they happen to be the same subject.
Okay, now how can you have as both a fave and a yawn? This I gotta hear. Go ahead.
This may be a first.
Yeah, exactly.
Mirage, I think out of Poland.
Yes, out of Poland.
In the 90s, they were putting out a lot of obscure and esoteric early war and small army stuff in 35th scale that, generally it wasn't very good.
Yep.
But it was the only game in town.
Right.
Well, they've kind of upped their game on their 72nd scale side of their armor stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And they've released a M8 75 millimeter howitzer motor carriage. The
gun motor carriage.
Gun motor carriage on the basically the Stuart.
Right. And
this kit's got, I think, some PE, some 3D printed stuff, and it's looks like a nice tight little kit.
Yeah.
I'm curious as the overall quality of the thing. Given them, Mirage is going to make me hedge because I've got all the old stuff from the 90s.
Sure.
But I've seen builds of some of their M3 Lee.
Yeah.
And those kits aren't bad. So looks like they may be leveling up. So.
And that is the normal progression for most model companies. You know, we've been spoiled by companies like Arma and ClearProp, who seem to have come out of the gate already fully formed. But most model companies, the old Special Hobby is the one that you think of, where they start out as short-run manufacturers and they get better over time.
So the Yawn is Tamiya's version of the same thing in 48 scale.
Yeah.
It's not my jam, Dave.
Well, that's okay. Listen,
and I tell you that the kit they have in 35th scale of the M8 is old.
Yes, it is.
And it's given that they, through their very first Panther kit, established 135th scale.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost blasphemous that they did this kit in 48 scale without doing a refresh of the 35th scale kit first.
You sound a little personally offended by that.
I guess I am. So I'm sure it's beautiful, but wrong scale to me. Too soon.
Well, I'm okay. God forbid a 72nd scale guy stands up for 48 scale. I still think one of the best moves Tamiya ever made was to start releasing 48 scale armor, because 48 scale armor makes a lot of sense. And so I will defend them in doing 48 scale, but I understand your frustration with them.
What else you got?
My next fave is in honor of Jim Bates. There's a company called Belcher Bits out of Canada.
Yep.
I've met the manufacturer. He's a nice guy. Again, a cottage industry. They've released... The Canadians did so many weird things in the 50s and 60s. One of the things they did was they borrowed a U.S. B-47, painted it up in Canadian markings with day glow panels, and they strapped an engine to the tail, on the side of the tail, that I think was testing an engine for the CF-105. I'm not 100% sure. Jim could educate us all about it. But Belcher Bits has actually done that conversion. It's released the markings and the resin to take the Hasegawa B-47 kit and modify it to this one-off Canadian test bed. And while it's maybe not my cup of tea and might even have been a yawn for me, given the fact that I know that Jim is excited about this and this is something he'll buy and maybe eventually build, not necessarily finish, but build. This is my fave in honor of Jim.
That's generous, Dave.
Thank you. I'm feeling generous.
Well, I've got one more, and it's a fave.
Okay.
I'm a little hesitant on this one because it's Mirage again, but it's 35th scale. I don't know if it's Kubus or Cubus. It was a shop-built armored car used by the Polish resistance in the Warsaw Uprising.
Oh, yes, I know exactly what you're talking about.
And they've kitted this thing in 35th scale. Now, it's been announced a while ago, but we haven't done one of these in a while. So,
and I think there was a previous kit of that, actually.
It's probably a resin kit.
Yeah, I think somebody did a resin kit. In fact, I'm reaching deep here. There is an article. I'm thinking it's in a previous RT. It might be in a previous journal where there is a full article on that particular one-off armored car because it's famous. Tom Romanowski could tell you all about it. And
it's an interesting subject.
Yes, it is. It's absolutely a very interesting subject. I've got a final fave, and that is our friends at Arma have released a double boxing, or at least announced a double boxing of the Arma F4 and their new P400/P39D Guadalcanal boxing. If you do not have these two Arma kits, both of which are fantastic, this is a chance to pick them both up at a price that you couldn't buy the two individual kits for. And again, all praise to Arma. They are doing amazing things. The more I work on this Arma P51, the more amazed I am by it, the more impressed I am by it. So if you don't own the Arma F4 and the P39, it's a nice chance to pick them both up on a little bit on the cheap.
Getting the right size base for your model, diorama, or vignette can be difficult and time-consuming. Bases by Bill has the solution with their all-new custom-size display bases. Offering sizes of 4 to 30 inches and any size in between, you choose the dimensions you want and you get the size you need every time. They can also be laser engraved with a unit emblem or custom text of your choice. In addition, shipping is always included within the lower 48 states. Built by modelers for modelers, Bases by Bill has bases and display cases for any type of model and for any size. Visit their website at basesbybill.com to see their new products or to get your own custom-built base or display case quote. Use the code MOJO at checkout to apply a 10% listener discount to your order. That code again is MOJO for 10% off. Bases by Bill for all your model display needs. Well, Dave, we got Steve Hustad back for our special segment tonight.
Yes, I can't wait.
And it was a good conversation, so let's not waste any time and get right into that.
Sounds great.
Well, Dave, we got our old friend from Minnesota back tonight, Steve Hustad. Steve, how you doing? Is it cold up there yet? It's been snowing down here a little bit.
Well, it's been cold on and off, but this week it looks like it's kind of hovering around freezing, so we're getting a forecast of some rain and snow mix later coming on. So
there you go.
That's worse than just snow. That thing
modeling weather.
Yeah, I spent 4 years in Kansas City, and they got a lot of ice storms down there, and that's tough.
Well, Steve, we had you on the first time, I think, as a kind of a general conversation, and then we had you back again talking about figures. Mm-hmm. And I think to bring this 70-second, or really any diorama in any scale, but primarily 70-second scale diorama topic, kind of full circle, I was hoping we could talk about your trees and your scenery tonight, because I think nothing strikes me as a lost opportunity as seeing an entry on the table that is a superbly executed model, be it in a diorama or just on a scenic base. And this sucker's just sitting on some unpainted woodland scenic ground foam or something like that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Go
ahead, Dave.
I was going to say the worst thing that you see as far as that goes is any particularly 70-second scale. For some reason, it stands out more in that scale, but it's true in any scale, where the Earth is depicted as a completely flat and level surface. Mm-hmm. And it just never looks right.
Right, and all the foliage looks the same height and distributed the same, or it's just laying down, or it's not painted, or it's hard. I think it's harder to make 70-second scale look good, and that's part of the challenge, and that's kind of why I like to do it. And so it all comes down to kind of scale finesse, and building in small scale kind of requires the modeler to kind of paint and recreate, kind of like an impressionist painter instead of like a realist painter.
Yeah.
Because you're kind of giving, I think you're just kind of trying to give impressions of detail where it's really too small to create some detail in some areas. So we're kind of turned into, French impressionist painters, I think, in a way. So.
Well, and you work a lot. You're like Mike. You're inspired by photographs, and you work a lot from photographs. So you're not only having the challenge of, okay, I've got to make this look realistic, but you've got the challenge of I've got to make it look realistic and look like this picture, like the groundwork in this picture, which strikes me as being much more challenging.
Yeah, it can be, especially if you only got one picture to go by. It's sometimes, because I do mostly kind of Luftwaffe crash aircraft and usually taken with Allied veterans photographs, but sometimes you luck out and you get a scene that's maybe photographed from several different angles, so that's kind of nice. And then you can get an idea more of the topography and which way the land is sloping, and something you thought was one way, looking at it straight on the scene you're going to model, looks very different from the other angle, so then you can kind of make corrections. So, but if you're doing it just from one photo, that then you just have to kind of use your imagination a lot too.
Sure.
And, yeah, so it's think of yourself as a Van Gogh, but with both ears.
There you go. Okay, let's start with your base. What do you use? I know it's very popular among the armor guys, and then you watch night shift videos or whatever. The very tight styrofoam-like material. Yeah,
there's and I use some of that too. I usually start with a wood plaque,
right?
But on top of that, I'll kind of work on the topography and I'll build up the topography and the sloped landscape with styrofoam. Or it's actually, I know what Martin Kovac typically uses. It's what's called an extruded polystyrene.
Right.
And being an architect, that's usually what's used in buildings, usually commercial buildings actually, because it's a very dense styrofoam, but that makes it easier to carve instead of like that beadboard stuff, which is more common packing material, and that doesn't cut real easily or cleanly. So I've been using some of that. I was actually up in my the attic above my garage the other day. I was hearing noises up there. I was thinking we had raccoons or something. So I get the ladder out and I'm in the garage and I'm poking through the hole up there, and I hadn't been up there since we bought the house, and I was looking around and I looked over and here's this pile of extruded polystyrene sitting there up in the attic space, just
nice.
just kind of stored there. And I've been to Home Depot and they want a fair amount of money for that stuff. So
it is amazing to me how expensive the really dense, the stuff I see in my local Home Depot is purple.
Yeah,
but, the different densities are different colors, apparently. But yeah, that stuff's expensive.
Yeah, so I'm up there and I'm getting dirty and I'm looking around. I shined the flashlight on this pile of, 2 feet by 6 feet, and there's like 4 of them stacked up on it. So if you want some, I'll give you some.
Sounds like you're set, though.
Yeah, I'm set, and I'll give away most of it, I'm sure. But that stuff works pretty well for bases. And what I've done before is I've used actual. It's a harder styrofoam that I think floral arrangers use sometimes, and you can manipulate that pretty well and just glue it to the base with white glue and kind of build up your contours that way. And then when that's done, I kind of usually switch to the old Shep Payne technique of using celluclay, that paper mache material,
right.
which comes in a gray or a white. So if you're doing a winter skiing, you use the whites, just because it's easier to paint.
Now, when you're working on the base, the styrofoam base, and you need to cut it, do you use a hot wire or do you carve it with a X-Acto, or how do you shape the base if you're going to cut part of it out to make a slope or cut a ditch in it or something like that?
Yeah, I usually just use an X-Acto knife because most in 72nd scale bases tend to be rather small, and I think the largest ones I've used, I did a Ju-52 crash scene once.
Right.
That was probably 16 by 12 or something. That might be like the biggest.
I remember seeing that model.
And that's and so I'll usually get the wood base and then build up the contours and the landscape with styrofoam, using mostly extruded polystyrene now, which is a building material. because it's easier to carve and easier to manipulate, and it glues with white glue.
Right.
And I'll kind of put that on there, and then smear the celluclay paper mache over the top, and that gets mixed up with just tons of white glue just so it sticks well. But I know Martin Kovac now has that VMS stuff.
Yes,
which
I saw that.
what does he call it? It's called VMS Smart Mud XL or something. And I bought some of it, but I haven't tried it yet. So, but it looks like it works sort of the same way. But
well, the celluclay, I've not used that in forever, but you had to use a lot of white glue.
Yeah, I used as much white glue as I used water, and then you kind of mix it to the consistency of a really thick oatmeal. And I spread it on with an old baby spoon. And then after
Silver
that,
one?
it's I think it was nickel plated with a bear on it or something. But it's and then when you get the contours laid down, I usually build up the sides off the wood base with like 3/16 inch basswood. And you can then miter the corners and build that up, and then you can kind of cut it down after the fact and then kind of build the celluclay back out to meet that and fill in the voids and that sort of thing.
Okay, so we're at the point where you have the groundwork and you've worked the contours in. You've got the celluclay on and you've got the contours and you've built the sides to contain that.
Yep.
So where do you go from there?
At that point, I usually will finish the wood sides and the wood base. I'll sand it and stain it and poly it, and then mask it.
Okay.
Because going forward, I want to protect all that. So, and that's just like you do around the house with refinishing a window or something. So
sure.
And but then. Then you can go back with more. I saved the celluclay too. I can kind of put it in a plastic bag, put it double bagged, and you can reuse it for a while. So, and you can smear on some more here and there if you want to fill more voids, because the stuff does shrink a little bit when it cures. And if you keep it wet, then you can use it as a wet layer to drop some gravel or sand or kind of sprinkle things in. And a good cheap source for that, of course, is the gutter in front of your house. You go out and just go out there with a whisk broom and a dustpan, and your neighbors will wonder what you're up to, but just sweep up all that stuff in the gutter in front of your house, and it's perfect for use. And what I did to get even stranger, it's since we're all modelers anyway, is sifted it into 3 different sizes. So
I'm not surprised.
Yeah. So you can have like 3, a really fine, which of course for 70-second scale is best. And then the second one is a little coarser and a little larger pieces. And then a larger one that I find I don't use much at all. But so then you can control what you're sprinkling on for that. And
now you put that stuff onto the groundwork. You maybe add a little celluclay or whatever, and then you sprinkle that on while it's wet to try and get it to bond into the ground, the base ground.
Yeah, and you can re-wet the celluclay with some brushed on diluted white glue as well. Especially since if you're not working quick enough and part of it starts to dry before you're finished to get into the next part, that comes in pretty handy too. And then you can just use that to deposit individual rocks or stones or things where you want them.
Sure. Now, if you're doing a crashed aircraft diorama and, you need to have marks in the ground in your groundwork, is this about the point where you'll start adding those?
Yeah, it's really important is to kind of work on everything all at once. And I usually have the model itself probably 90% done at this point. And I've got the figures about maybe 80% done. And you bring them all together repeatedly over while you're still working on the base, because you want them all to fit when you put it together at the end. And early on, if I'd get lazy and I'd then be surprised when something wouldn't fit, and it's kind of like, well, duh, you know. so now you just do everything all at once, and you test fit, and take photos. The cell phone camera is a great tool.
Yes.
I had one Battle of Britain diorama where there was 18 figures on it, and it was these British RAF and Army personnel they had collected this 109 that had crashed, and it was being recovered and pulled away by a team of horses.
Yeah, I remember that one.
And there was some RAF personnel and some Army personnel pushing or pretending to push the 109 like they were pushing it, but there was 18 figures, and there was a group of like 6 or 7 of them that were all interacting and touching each other. So that group especially, you have to make sure they all work together. So looking at the photograph and looking and modifying each of the figures and kind of building them up against each other and touching each other, so that they're configured and touching and interacting exactly the way you want to. And when you get it to that point, you can use your cell phone camera and take a photograph of that from a couple angles, so that when you come back later, you remember exactly this guy's hand was on this guy's shoulder and this guy's other hand was, pushing the back of the elevator and the plane and that kind of thing. So that's really useful for planning and interacting the dioramas. But as far as like crashed in ruts and things, I usually carve those out ahead of time. Or sometimes if I make a mistake, I'll go back and I'll cut through the celluclay, the dried celluclay, and just kind of rework an area. And don't be afraid to do that, because it's so easy to build it up again if you make mistakes.
Yeah, very forgiving. And that is something, by the way, that I have noticed just generally. If you take photographs of your model as you're building it and then look at the photographs, I always see something that I don't see when I look directly at the model.
Right.
And yeah, I don't know why that works. I don't know what it is about it, but there is something about looking at a photograph of the model. You'll see a defect, a hair, a something that when you looked at the model directly while you were working on it, you just don't see it.
Red spinner paint.
Yeah, well, I knew that was there. That was not, but that is a valid point. Yes.
I'm sorry, Dave.
Yeah.
Well, I can relate to this, making it all work together and all come together at once, as you're saying, Steve, because I'm working on this KV-85 tank, and it's going to be crossing a railroad roadbed. Mm-hmm. So I have to articulate the suspension. So, elements of the terrain, elements of the model, and the railroad tracks all have to be kind of done at the same time, and it all has to come together, at least at a point, to pose the suspension before I fix it permanently, and then go from there. So, yeah, it took me a while to learn that. I think I used to finish the model and then make the base fit, so they tended to all be flat because I didn't pose the suspension on my tanks or anything. So
when you start articulating, you start articulating things more, and you just have to make sure it's more to save you pain later when you bring it all together, and because otherwise you end up cutting and carving late in the game, and you don't want to do that, and it just makes it so much easier. And then it's so much more satisfying to model that way too, and because it'll work, and you're not just kind of holding your breath until the end.
There's something kind of related to that I see in your dioramas is your models look like they have weight. A lot of times on a diorama, you will look at it and the model appears to be resting on the ground, but it doesn't look like it has weight to it. It looks like it's, made of tissue paper or whatever. And it looks like it's just sitting on top of
sitting on the high points,
the groundwork. Right.
Yeah. That's a good point. And
especially with a crashed aircraft.
Yeah. When you have an aircraft sitting on its belly on the ground after it's scraped across the steep or whatever. And it's you have to carve the model into the base. Like I did It was a crash scene. It was an HE-111 in a winter scene that had crashed in the out in the middle of Russia somewhere. It's just flat and desolate and white, but the radiators on the underside of the engines were so deep, they would really carve a rut on both sides when it came in, and so I had to carve those out, and then actually had to get the drill out and actually drill down on the base where the plane would sit finally, so the radiators would sit into the wood, and then you could carve out a place for the fuselage. So when you get back and look at it, I think when I finally finished that, when I put the HE-111 in the rut that I'd carved for the fuselage and in the holes that I'd made for the engine radiators, and then I took the wet celluclay I still had bagged, and you can kind of work that up and around it. And this is before I did the snow color and all that rest of it around that. But yeah, you're right. It needs to, especially a crash scene or a scene like an aircraft, that needs to sit in or so it doesn't look like it's on. And that is a big mistake that a lot of people do make. So, but it does make a big difference to the eye when you look at it.
Yep, I agree. So you're talking about, you do bits of this all kind of simultaneously rather than get all the groundwork done, then get the figures done, get the model done, get the foliage done. So as you're working on and again, you work from pictures a lot. As you're working on the groundwork, you're also, where does the foliage, and by foliage, I'm talking everything from, bushes to high reeds or weeds, up to trees and all of that. Where in the process do you start fitting that in?
Right about the point after you get the gravel and maybe the plane itself in place, and again, this is where the photographs help out, because you're not guessing where things should go. You're looking and seeing where things should go, and that actually makes it easier. And you can see that the grass, for instance, is missing over here, but it's really thick over there, and it's got some bare spots here and there, so that should be open and gravel or whatever. And but I work it up usually from the smaller height foliage up to the tallest tree in that order.
Well, before we go too far down that direction, once you've got the celluloid like you want it, and the textures like you want them, the sand and gravel, etc., when do you start adding color to that? And maybe that's in concert with the foliage and the ground cover.
The color comes in. Usually, I'll put the grass on first, without doing any painting yet on the groundwork. I'll do the celluclay, and I'll do any bare earth. I'll do any gravel or sand, and I'll do the grass. And then, again, I kind of revert back to the old Shep Payne technique of using mostly enamels on that. But I'm kind of switching over to the Martin Kovac technique now, where he airbrushes a lot of the base colors, and he even goes over it with like Mr. Surface or 1200 mahogany or something. But you can saturate the celluclay with mineral spirits, which it takes in really well. And then you can use enamel paints to kind of wash it in and kind of wet mix it here and there, and just to lay down the base colors. And that includes the grass. And before I get to the grass, or continue much further, the grass, I use static grass, and of course for 72nd scale I use the 2mm stuff, and I've got some 4mm stuff and some taller stuff. So I actually bought one of those electronic flocking machines that are on eBay. They're only like $25, but they work amazingly well, and they can put off quite a shock too if you touch it wrong.
That's what
I was about to ask. They'll give you a $40 shock.
Oh man, for just a couple little AA batteries, you'd be surprised what that thing can generate.
Well, I was gonna ask you about grass, what you use. So you're still, I don't want to say old school, but the classic static grass, and for 70-second scale, the 2 millimeter, and then maybe 4 millimeter for higher tufts of grass or something like that.
Well, just to lay down the basics, yeah.
Okay.
And then switch over. I've been starting to use a lot more of like the AK, the tufts and things.
Yes. And
you can buy that in a lot of different sizes too. And almost everything's made for 1/35th scale, because that's probably, 95% of dioramas you see. But
yeah,
if you tend to get really particular about what you see and buy, you can find some that are adaptable to 70-second scale. Like that's just the smaller ones. Or sometimes you can buy bigger tufts and just pull them apart with tweezers.
Mm-hmm.
And you can use like segments of them, dip them in a little bit of white glue and put them where you want. And so you can use the bigger stuff if it looks, the color is what you want, and maybe it's got little flowers on it or something. You can pull it apart with tweezers and make it smaller, and that helps. And then, because what you're really looking for in small scale is get that scale finesse, and that's something that's difficult to achieve in small scale. But when you do achieve it, it does look good, and and I think that's why you see a lot of dioramas that maybe they kind of ignore the scale effect. We'll use this product because it's available, and we'll use this over here because it's easy to use. But if you pay attention to the scale of it, you can start building things up. And this is where the photos come in handy again too, because you can see where the grass is tall, and you can see where it's short. You can see where it's missing. And so anyway, I get the grass down and the gravel, and then I put the base colors down with usually enamels and thinner. But then I'll switch to the airbrush, and I've been switching to use acrylics now with the airbrush. And you can kind of build it up with darker colors to lighter on the grass, and you can do that in riverbeds. But the third thing I use on the groundwork usually is oil paints. And you can use gently dry brush on oil paints. You can get such a finer effect with oil paints and dry brushing, and it gives a really fine effect. But so anyway, that brings us up to maybe the grass areas. So and shrubs. Again, AK has a lot of shrubs, and I sometimes I'll go to Michael's and I'll buy the dry foliage that's meant for like dry flower displays and things.
Right.
You can buy those and find something that has some more intricate branching to it. And it doesn't really matter if it looks out of scale then, because you can take that larger stuff and you can cut branches off and you can super glue them on so that you can create something smaller and more intricate with super glue. So, and if you have super glue and a little bit of accelerator, the process is actually pretty quick for building up small shrubs. And then you can use the AK stuff and pull it apart and put that in the shrubs and stuff. But so you can kind of build up shrubbery that way. And I've also used a product that I'd abandoned a long time ago, and that was kind of that ground foam stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You can use a little bit of that, but you don't want to use too much, because that really looks like what it is if you
Yeah, I was about to mention that. One, because you mentioned these tufts and things. There's a model railroad centric company called Scenic Express.
Yeah,
that sells a lot of that stuff, and I've used that before. But I think thinking about this discussion before we actually got started, in the days ahead, I was kind of wondering. HO scale model railroading and 70-second scale modeling aren't that far apart, really.
Right.
And
right. I think that's technically 187th or something.
187th, yeah. And it's the model railroading community is kind of, they've got their set of stuff they use a lot of times. A lot of it is ground foam, but I think when you're not having to deal with something that large, typically, and need to do that much work over such a vast area, over a limited amount of time, that with a 70-second scale diorama, even, a 4-engine bomber crash it's not small, but it's not a model railroad either, right?
No. And that's why they use what they do, is because it's easy and fast. And
yeah. And it's interesting because, There's a model railroader who was actually modeled in N scale. His name was Lance Menheim, and he did some amazing things in N scale, which is 144th scale, I think. And but he didn't use a lot of that stuff. He kind of did more what you're doing, and it really paid huge dividends in his scenery. Of course, I'm on a tangent now, but no ground foam. I think that's really interesting. You even brought that up, but
yeah, you can use it sparingly here and there. Like sometimes I'll clump it up with some white glue and I'll stick it underneath shrubs, just here and there, to just very small pieces, and it kind of looks like just can kind of build up like small mini shrubs under the shrubs. And because groundwork, the foliage, it's always kind of small to large, and most people forget the medium in between stuff, and that's what really kind of infills the eye when you look at it, and it makes it look more natural.
Well, I think the ground foam is so uniform in size and shape and color.
Yeah, and again, you can pull that apart and manipulate it, and most people just use it as is. So
you've got your shrubs in, now you're going to actual trees.
Mm-hmm.
How do you build your trees? I've seen people with the wire armature trees. I've seen people using, some organic item, be it a root or a dry foliage from, flower arranging or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
How do you make most of your trees, particularly if you're going to model something that you can see in a photograph, so the tree can be kind of distinctive?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, again, like now you can almost buy trees from AK. They're all very expensive, but I like to make my own. And you mentioned roots. If you have like a gnarled oak tree or just a shell shattered tree, sometimes a root works well for that. And I've been up in the woods in back of my house after a rain, pulling up things, and my neighbors are probably watching and filing, getting concerned. But usually, what I use for trees is, again, the Michael's dry foliage. You can go or at Hobby Lobby, I think, has it too, and you can find things that look like they're trees, and except the branching of them, but maybe they're too big, and you can take those apart and you can build off of those with super glue. Super glue works surprisingly well to a natural material like that. And with a little accelerator, it goes quick. And then there was a diorama I finished that had some tall trees on it, called Blown Up and Souvenired. It was that JU-88 that was
the one that's got its
apart.
Right, back broken.
Yeah, and that had some tall trees in the background, which made kind of a nice background for it. But,
right.
So I built the trees up that way using the dry floral things, and then and then I raided my wife's kitchen for some let's see, what was that stuff? It was the oregano leaves and basil and parsley flakes and all that stuff, plus all the stuff I'd cut off the foliage that I'd kind of ground up. And so I mixed that, put it in a cup, and then I had another cup with some diluted white glue. And then you can kind of dip the branches in the diluted white glue and then dip them into the mixture of leaves you created. And you can go back and forth and then let it dry and then come back the next day and do it again. And again and again. You build it up that way, and you get a surprisingly good-looking tree. And you don't have actual tree shapes, or tree leaf shapes, because that's only made for like 35th scale.
Right.
But you get things, again. You're an impressionist painter, and you're giving the impression of the smaller leaves, and that's the way to do it. Of course, if you look at it really closely, you'll see that each individual supposed leaf, probably doesn't look much like a leaf if you really get down close with a magnifier and look at it. But from, just even a few inches away, it looks pretty convincing. So that's the way I build up my trees anyway.
Now, have you tried pine trees at all?
Yes.
Because those to me seem super, and you wouldn't think that they would be, but for some reason, the combination of the shapes of them and then the fact that they have the needle leaves make them really, really hard to simulate in either 35th or 72nd scale.
Right. And I've got a technique I use for those, and I've done some pine trees. I just finished about 6 months ago a 72nd scale armor diorama that was in the Ardennes campaign. It was it was a Panther tank kind of shoved down a ditch, and there's like 3 or 4 GIs standing on top of it, kind of looking in the hatch. But it's kind of a winter scene. But all around it are these pine trees. So what I did there is out in my wife's garden, she's got some long grasses that kind of lose all their fluffiness in the fall. So I go out and pluck those, and so I get these pieces that are maybe 6 inches long, and they've got it's got a pretty straight, but it's got these little tiny, maybe 1/8 inch long branches that come off of them after you get all the fuzzies off of them. Mm-hmm. And then I take those and use those, the larger ones, for the trunk. And then I'll take a product I found from a company called Mini Nature. Have you heard of them?
Yes, I have. I've got some tufts from them, actually. Yeah,
they make all kinds of stuff, but they also make long and short evergreen boughs, except it's kind of it almost looks like expanded metal, the way it's this kind of brown or dark green. And it's kind of this, it doesn't look anything like it in the box, but I take that and I cut them apart, like maybe a 1/2 inch long by an 1/8 inch wide piece or 1/16 inch wide piece. And then piece by piece, I'll build it up from the bottom, larger to smaller, with glue, which is white glue. And it takes, or you can use super glue too. And you kind of build it up, and it looks kind of rough at first, but then when it's all dry, you can take the scissors and you can kind of trim it into more of a conical shape. But it's got a really good kind of fuzzy texture to it that even by a couple inches away, it looks like evergreen boughs. And you can use that for even evergreen boughs on camouflaging a tank, or in this case, it was just surrounding scenery on the scene. But that works pretty good. And that company, Mini Nature, it's a German company. You can find them on eBay. And Mike, they do make tufts also, and all kinds of other grasses. I ordered it from Germany, and
well, the tufts I got from Scenic Express ended up being Mini Nature.
Okay. Oh, that's who made them. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they probably sell them to.
So there's a domestic supplier if you need one.
Okay, that's good to know. But they're a really good company. Like AK has really branched out, and they've got a lot of that stuff. And
we were joking the other day that it's going to be another 6 months, and we're going to see AK tube glue.
Probably.
Well, did you see? Speaking of groundwork and everything, just today, AK announced the release of. There are these bottles of, what would you call them, Mike? Flocking? Or...
Yeah. I don't know what the stuff is. It's probably ground foam.
It's probably ground up ground foam. Who knows? But they are releasing it as moss for 35th scale dioramas.
Really?
Which I suspect probably would have a use in 72nd scale dioramas for foliage on trees.
Well, here's another tip. Go back to Michael's, and they have bagged moss there.
Yeah.
Which is, I bought a bag. It'll probably last like 5 lifetimes, but it's got just tons of this little ferns and little things in it that are just tiny. Mm-hmm. And it's I think it's sold just to decorate around the bases of flowers. So, but I got a bag of this stuff that's probably 8 inches by 10 inches by 2 inches thick, and I used it to put some scale foliage camouflage on a Jagdtiger I did too, a 72nd scale, and because that's especially difficult to get that on the vehicle and make it look to scale. But they have these parts of these moss, it looks just perfectly like a fern branch in scale. It's just great, and you can use that stuff underneath shrubbery too, and or even photo etch stuff. You found, I think, You can find, I think even Edward has some that's mostly 35th scale, but
Right.
I found some ferns by, I think it was Edward in 35th scale. I bought it, but I used only the smaller ones in a ME262 diorama where it was kind of tucked into the woods. And there's some British soldiers looking at or posing in front of it, and that works. So you can find some photo etch stuff that can kind of duplicate for some foliage. Again, it's mostly 35th scale, but if you buy, they usually have a variety of sizes. So if you have a 35th scale friend, maybe you buy 2 of them. You take the small stuff, give them the big stuff.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's why everybody needs to have an 35th scale armor modeler as a friend. That's right. That's how I acquired Mike. Steve, as far as foliage goes, what's the toughest thing in retrospect that you've done foliage wise? What was the hardest to pull off and make look right?
Probably those pine trees.
Okay.
Yeah, I think probably the actual deciduous trees were surprisingly straightforward, and they came out better than I expected and easier than I expected. The pine trees were a little tougher. I did another diorama once that had I don't know if you're familiar with the Bachem BA349 Natter.
Oh yeah.
I did a diorama where there was 3 of those that were on carts that were abandoned in a field.
Yep.
And each of those were covered with these kind of evergreen boughs. And I had good photos from around, and that was...
Yeah, it was a well-shot scene. I mean, because that was photographed from... It's almost like they walked completely around them to take the photographs.
Yeah, and actually you can do a search on YouTube. There's an actual video of that whole scene. So I would... For angles I didn't have, I'd go and watch that video on YouTube, and then I'd stop it and take a screenshot, just so you can get kind of the angles you're missing with regular photographs that way. But that had some evergreen foliage on that was put on there as kind of camouflage. But that was in 72nd scale. That was difficult, and so evergreen boughs, I think, or evergreen trees are the most difficult. But again, for those, I again used that Mini Nature product that's made for building up evergreen trees. They give you some. They just intend you to wrap it around this wire armature they give you and just call it good. But I threw away the wire armature and I started picking apart the the pieces they gave you and kind of build it up piece by piece. So. But that, and then just trim it with the scissors, and then after it's done, you can paint it with the airbrush and some oil paints and get more subtlety in it that way. And I did the same thing with deciduous trees when you paint those. What I did, I'd spray them black from the bottom, and then kind of a black green from the side, and then lighter greens from the top, and almost a straight yellow from the top down, and that actually, it's an easy way to create some pretty good shadow effects and highlight effects pretty easily and quickly.
Is there a type of foliage that you haven't done that you'd like to attempt? Something like a palm tree, or, just something that you see as a challenge?
I haven't done any palm trees yet. That could be a challenge. I know there are some photo etch palm fronds out there.
Right.
And I know also, as I think I've mentioned before, I'm a real sucker for modeling how-to books.
Yes, you and me both.
Yeah, I buy, and I've learned a lot from them too. But I buy a lot of those things, and those have some good ideas. But one idea in there for palm fronds I thought was good is paper. And paper can look surprisingly realistic and you just airbrush it, and you can cut it with scissors, and you can twist it and bend it and airbrush it and glue it, and you get 2 or 3 layers and sticking out this way and that way, and before you know it, you've got something that looks far more realistic than that photo etch thing that's also far more expensive. So yeah, so I think that can be created that way, and I've done some regular ferns that way. but I imagine the same technique would work for palm trees.
Sure. Now, when you go to the Nationals or any contest, but the Nationals you're going to see the most, you're walking down the aircraft, the small scale dioramas, either small scale armor dioramas, small scale aircraft dioramas. You're walking down, you're looking at those. When you look at those, what do you see that immediately takes you out of the diorama? What flaws, mistakes? What is it when you're going down the aisle, you look and you immediately go, that doesn't look right?
I'd say most of it probably is just the same as looking at any other. It's usually composition might be bad, or there's wide areas of open space that just aren't doing anything, or the figures are just not interacting with each other. But with 72nd scale, it is usually scale finesse, usually using overscale aftermarket materials that are meant for bigger scales in 72nd, or just when we do larger dioramas, I think sometimes a lot of modelers kind of run out of steam and they just kind of finish it up just to get it done and it looks like it.
Thanks. I feel seen.
Yeah, guilty as charged.
Yeah, guilty as charged.
And that's why it's always best to keep the base as absolutely small as you can.
Yeah.
And that actually helps the focus for the viewer too, and it reduces the amount of work you got to put into it, and the work you do put into it then is a lot more highly focused. So
you keep referencing back to Shep Payne. That was one of Shep Payne's initial lessons. He had the diorama book and he talked about composition.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the lessons he was talking about was keeping the bases small to keep the focus on what was on the diorama rather than having an overly large base,
right?
Which detracts from that focus.
Yeah, and the other thing, of course, going back to their previous podcast, is usually the figures aren't done very well. They're not painted very well. They're not posed very well, and that kind of stands out right away too. But I have one kind of rule of thumb with, or actually several, but kind of the major rule of thumb I have for modeling in 72nd scale, whether it's a diorama or the KI-45 Nick I'm working on right now or whatever, it's if you have a choice, there's always choices you make while you're modeling. When you're scratch building or you're coming up with a piece that you want to substitute for a kit piece or something, or you have to replace something you've lost in the carpet monster or whatever.
No, that never happens.
No. Or some piece that's, pinged off into the netherworld from your tweezers is whenever you're looking to select a replacement or select a piece to put on your 72nd scale modeler, you're often faced with a choice between something that's a little thinner or a little thicker than it should be, or a little bigger or a little smaller than it would be. And I guess my rule of thumb is always go with the smaller or thinner selection, even if it looks too thin or too small, because it'll always look better on the model than something that's a little bit too big or a little bit too thick.
Gotcha.
And I think 72nd scale, that's often what gives away the scale is this lack of scale finesse, and you need to really kind of pay attention to that. So your pitot tube needs to be in scale, and if you have a little handhold on the canopy pole, maybe make that out of the electrical wire you've stripped out of some insulated wiring instead of the oversized piece from the photo etch fret or something. So
gotcha. Now, you mentioned our previous discussion and figures. Have you gone on ScaleMates and looked? Because Mike and I have been, ever since we recorded that podcast with you, Mike and I have been talking pretty regularly about all of the new 72nd scale figures and 72nd scale figure companies that are announcing product. A lot of it's 3D print. But it's just like all of a sudden there are no end to these companies. And I'm wondering if because I know Mike purchased some just to see from one particular company and theirs weren't very good. I wondered if you had been dipping your toes into any of these just to see if there's something that's, compatible with your needs.
Let's see, you say you found those on ScaleMates?
Yes, ScaleMates. One of my habits is about once a week or once every 2 weeks, I go to ScaleMates, I click on what's new, and then I select 70-second scale, and I just look for everything new that's been announced in 70-second scale for the last 2 weeks or whatever.
I do that on Hanitz.
Yeah, well, I used to use Hanitz for that, but ScaleMates is a little bit broader. But yeah, the same thing with Hanitz. But Hanitz doesn't carry every product line, so they don't have all of the announcements. But yeah, they're just, if you look on ScaleMates, there's got to be a dozen new figure companies in the last 2 months.
Yeah, I've seen some of them, but I haven't tried any of them yet. I think at the Omaha Nationals, there were some that I saw that were used, and they looked pretty good. And in the 70-second scale diorama areas, there's one or two that I noticed had obviously used them, and they did look pretty good. I haven't gotten any myself yet, but if I did, I'd probably just buy them for parts. I'd probably cut them up and use their arms and legs and separate. But yeah, there's probably no reason why we couldn't, especially since Prizer seems to be not importing here anymore. So.
Right. Well, and that's one of the reasons I mentioned it, is looking for an alternate quality, a product that you find to be equivalent to the Prizer figures, but is now becoming available and maybe already pre-made as the particular figures you want, as opposed to converting a Prizer figure.
Yeah, of course, if you're matching it to a pose in a photograph, you're probably stuck with having to modify them. But yeah, but otherwise, you're
gonna have to do something anyway.
Yeah, Mike, did you ever get around to doing that? You said you were going to do a 70-second armor diorama. You said once.
Oh, I'll do another one. It'll be another like nostalgia. Well, no, we talked about one that I want to do a little more serious, didn't we?
Yeah, you sent me a picture of it.
Yeah, that was a photograph of what was it? It's a Tiger One crawling by a disabled or knocked out KV-1.
Yeah,
and I filled a basket on eBay with all the stuff I would need to build that, but I'd never pulled the trigger on it yet. But it's still on the list.
Mike has the same problem I do. That's
I need four of me to get all the stuff down.
Exactly. Or one of me who has focus and doesn't procrastinate. At the Cincinnati show, Barry Numerick and myself and 2 or 3 other guys were standing there talking, and somebody posited that building faster and completing models was a better way to get better than building slowly and carefully. And
I think just building continuously is maybe a better way. I mean, I think what they're trying to say, and it's kind of what I've always said, is the more you build, the better you get and the faster you get.
Yes.
And I think that's absolutely true. So, I think the way to do that is just to be continuously build. Just try and get an hour a day in at least, or just so you're always working on something and always advancing a project. And the more you do, then you'll find yourself getting faster, and because the experience builds up, and then you know how to do this and that where you didn't before, and that goes quicker, and then you're on to the next step. And so it's the more you do, the better you get and the faster you get.
Yeah, I do think that the more I've thought about it, and like I said, it was an interesting discussion that I keep coming back to, that I do think the more you build, and particularly the more you do the basic stuff, the better you get at it and the quicker you get at it. And once you've gotten better and quicker, then everything else starts to get better and quicker.
Yep. And Barry himself is an excellent example of that, because he is quite prolific and quite good. And that's a good example of that very theory is he builds a lot, he works at it a lot, and he turns out a lot, and it's all super high quality. So
yes, Barry sent Mike and I an email because I had been in that same conversation in Cincinnati. We were talking about unbuilt kits. And, Barry focuses on ME109s. And I'm like, we were just standing there joking around. And I said, Barry, how many unbuilt 72nd scale 109 kits do you have? And his answer was well over 250. I was incredulous.
Well, I asked him the same question at the Omaha Nationals. We were in the contest room, and we were talking about the new the Edward 109 series that are coming out in 72nd scale. And I said, I'm sure you're aware of that. And he says, oh, yeah. And I said, well, just out of curiosity, I says, you've been building mostly the fine molds 109s. I said, how many of those do you have? And without even missing a beat, he says 117. So just the fine molds ones.
I was somewhat incredulous when he told me all that at Cincinnati. So he emailed Mike and I photographs of his stash just to prove he was not pulling my leg. And
it's incredible.
It is absolutely unbelievable.
Yeah.
So no matter how fast he builds, he's going to need to build faster.
Yeah. Oh, he's such a good modeler too.
He is. He really is. I mean, it just.
Well, he's the one that got me into riveting, and I've been doing that now. And the two 190 D9s I just finished, I didn't have to rivet. One was the new IBG kit,
right?
And the other one was the AZ models 190D, which has rivets on it too. So I used the riveter to kind of touch up after it was all together. But the ones before that, the HE 115 and the AR 196 and the two, the Hasegawa Tojo and the Hasegawa Nick, I did the riveting on those, and I can thank Barry for getting me into that. So, but you guys are always saying, what are you doing to get better, right? So,
well, I eventually want to try that technique simply because of the fact that Barry makes it look so easy and good. And of course, anything that looks both easy and good is never easy.
Yep. And he turns them out pretty quickly, and
does.
I think and that's because he's gotten so good and fast at it. And of course, he builds 109, so they're all, and mostly the fine molds ones. So he's got those down to a science. But boy, they're beautiful models.
Yes, they are absolutely. And I do think there is probably a certain speed advantage to building the same kit over, or same family of kits over and over again. Is once you've built it for the 5th time, you know where all of the potential pitfalls are. Right.
And that's why to speed things up, I always build 2 at a time. Like right now, the Nick and the Tojo, or before the HE115 and the 196, because I like to pick ones that have kind of used some of the similar colors so I don't have to clean out the airbrush as much. So.
Well, you've mentioned some projects there. What's going to come off the finish line as dioramas?
Well, I just did the AR-196. That's one I've titled Lost at Sea. And it's one where it's kind of breaking up and ditching in the sea. And there's a pilot on the wing, and there's a pilot in a life raft, or a observer in the life raft, and they're trying to come together before the thing sinks. So I did finish that. And I do want to build the DO-217M that Dave turned me on to.
I knew that was so up your alley when I saw that. It wasn't funny.
And there's a lot of good photos of that too.
Well, so. It's a great story. And you're right. There's a ton of photographs. It's not like just one photo of that thing.
And again, there's a video on YouTube of that after
Right.
it crashed in the garden, so I could pause that and take some screenshots for angles I didn't have before. So I'm ready to do it,
And you can do with that one. You can do a building or two.
yeah, well, it crashed in somebody's garden, so at
Right.
least to get the garden and maybe
A garden shed.
yeah. So
Well, we look forward to all those. When are we going to see you again? What's your show schedule looking like?
I don't know. We just went to the Chicago show. Hope you guys can make that next year.
Oh, I want to get back to that. I really miss it.
That was a lot of fun, and I think I'm gonna. Mark and I are going to try and make the Roscoe Turner show in April.
Oh, that would be fantastic.
That was a fun show to go to. So
It is a good show.
We went there to see you guys, but now we're going to go for the show. So,
Yeah, right.
Well, this time we'll rearrange our schedule so that we can go back to the hotel room and have a happy hour.
yeah, or get a little earlier. We can go out to dinner or something. But yeah, and so after that, I think we're planning on San Marcos, and we've got our own Nordic Con coming up in September. September 30th, and that's we're going to do it on that date, and that's our own local show we have here. And we're going to do something a little different this year. We're going to change our NordicCon to a contest and an exhibition. So we're going to do display and contest together on the tables, just with different entry sheets.
Sure.
So trying to go to the show.
That's and is there a reason you all decided to do that?
Just we want to try and grow the show more. We usually average around 400 models, but we think we can get it up to 500 or even 600 if we kind of appeal. There's a lot of people that like to build, but they don't like to enter contests.
Gotcha.
And there's some in our club like that, and I know they like to display their work, but they don't like the contest atmosphere. So now we do kind of an open, the aircraft judging is more of an open gold, silver, bronze
right.
system. It's not a 1, 2, 3 system, but even so, this year we're going to have do the display and the exhibition. We're going to mix them together. They'll go in the categories with the contest models, but they'll be just for display only. But they'll have to pay the rate as if they're entering the contest as well.
Sure.
So, and I'm going to do a seminar on 72nd scale aircraft dioramas and display my whole collection of aircraft dioramas.
All right, so. We're going up. That's the week after our regional, Mike.
That's September 30th.
September 30th. We're going. Well, actually, I've got no excuse. I could go out to the airport and get on an airplane and fly for free. So I have no excuse not to get there.
Oh, that'd be great to have you guys here. That'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'll have to. Mike, we need to sit down with that calendar.
I know we do, man.
It's starting to fill up.
Maybe we can get you the Chicago show in mid-October too, or something.
That's a lot easier than Minnesota.
Yeah.
Yes, that's actually from Louisville. That's not a bad drive.
We'll just get Mike a buddy pass, right?
Right. Well, not only, but Mike for Chicago.
Can adopt me.
Yeah.
Hey, here you go. Hey, Mike, for Chicago, you realize that if we go to the Chicago show, we drive right by 3 Floyds.
Yeah, we could.
I mean, quite literally right by it.
Well, Steve, thank you for all the insight, and thanks for joining us again. And then we'll have to think up another topic to get you back on here.
We're going to come back for water. He's got to do at least one more, which is water and snow and ice.
Yeah, we could do water. Yeah, water, snow, and ice, and that's kind of a whole nother animal by itself. And
yeah, well, especially with you having doing that 196, and of course Mike has an interest in that particular aircraft, so maybe we can give him some ideas.
Or go me to finish.
There you go, one or the other.
Oh, and one other thing. Yeah. As we get older, I was going to mention when you get, we're working in smaller scales, and even 35th scale. It's, it's not like you're doing 124th. It's of course, as we get older, we need more light.
Yep.
But one thing I did is when I had my last eye exam, you go and talk to the ophthalmologist, and I told him what my hobby was, and when he was done laughing, I got him to. I said, now take the prescription that you have for the bifocal lens on my regular glasses, and make that in a full lens prescription by itself, and increase the magnification by a factor of 3. So I had him write me up that, and I had a special pair of glasses made just for modeling, which really does make a difference. No, but what it does is it helps you avoid mistakes that make you, and when you see it clearly and sharply and up close. So I just, had the reading prescription and said increase the magnification by like 3 or 4, and that works great.
I'm about due for an eye exam. I may have to have that talk with my.
Yeah, just it doesn't cost anything. I can write out the separate prescription and go down to Pearl Vision, and with a coupon in hand from the Sunday paper, and for $100 you can get a pair of modeling glasses that are perfect for you.
That's not a bad idea. I'll have to look into that.
Yeah.
So, well, you start planning on talking about water and snow and ice, and we'll have you back on before too long.
That sounds good.
Sounds
all
great.
right.
Mike, it's always a pleasure to talk with Steve. Again, he's been one of the folks that I've admired his work for a long, long time. And one of the great things about this podcast is that's enabled me to connect with him and learn from him and interact with him. So I always enjoy these interviews, and I can't wait for the next one. We've already got the next one planned, and I can't wait for it. I assume that you're about at the end of your modeling fluid.
I am.
And so tell me about Bullet Tenure.
Well, I've featured it before on here. It's got a little more flavor than the standard orange label bullet. It's a little hotter. But the reason I got it again was because I've gone through a couple of bottles of that Russell's Reserve 10-year.
Yep.
Over the last couple months. And I think I like it better, to be honest.
Really?
So I think
wait a minute. Bullet has been unseated?
Bullet 10-year's been unseated.
Okay.
I don't know about standard Bullet.
I was going to say, next thing you're going to have to do is go back to standard Bullet and give us a comparison between standard Bullet and Russell 10-year. Now, understanding that Russell 10-year is a little more expensive price point wise.
But it's not as expensive as the Bullet 10-year.
Which is interesting. Now you're going to have to give us a comparison between the Russell 10-year and the Bullet regular. And I'm interested to hear if Russell can unseat Bullet, because you've been a Bullet guy for a long time.
Well, how's the wine?
It's good. Again, I'm not a wine guy generally, unless you're eating certain very rich foods, particularly French foods. There are certain very rich French foods for which wine is almost the required thing to have. I'm generally more of a steak and bourbon guy, or a beer and pizza or beer and wings guy. But I will give Mr. Vitkus his due. With the appropriate meal, a red wine makes perfect sense. And if you're going to drink a red wine, this Coppola 2019 Cabernet is very, very good. It's very drinkable. I enjoyed it. It got me through the episode. I've got nothing bad to say about it.
Well, there you go, folks. 2 recommendations.
We are at the end of the episode, and it's time for shout-outs. What shout-outs do you have?
Well, I would like to first shout out our Patreon and PayPal contributors. We've got a few new ones since last time.
Yep.
Marion Morris, Paul DeOrival, and Andrew Armstrong have chosen to contribute financially to our little effort here. And if folks would like to follow their lead, you can do so by going to www.patreon.com/plasticmodelmojo. There you can sign up for a recurring contribution. If you want to kick us a little every month, you can do it at Patreon. They'll help you. Patreon will help you get that down the road. If you'd like to make a one-time contribution or manage your own recurring contribution, you can go to www.plasticmodelmojo.com, and in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, you'll see a heart icon that goes to our PayPal link, and you can do whatever you want to do there. We really appreciate it. It's helped us move over to this new platform that we're finally getting some polish on and learning how to use and enjoying that. And guys, you make it all possible for us and keep us motivated. So thank you very much.
Again, I also want to thank all of you guys that contribute. I also want to shout out Steve Hustad for indulging us. I've been a fan of his forever. The only reason I got to interact with him other than saying a hello at a national is the fact that we started doing these podcasts. And if nothing else, the ability to interact with him and the ability to learn from what he does. He doesn't seem to think it's as special as it is and as unique as it is, but it is. And I really want to shout out Steve and thank him for indulging me in letting us basically pick his brain again and again.
Well, I've got another one.
I've got one too, so go ahead.
Mr. Adam Mann. And Adam is a YouTuber and a good friend of Evan McCallum's. Adam is a modeler, does primarily German armor on YouTube. We can put a link in the show notes. And okay. Adam is also kind of a collector and connoisseur of tank track links and fittings. So he's got a collection of German track links and tool clasps and stuff like that, tow hooks, all the small accoutrement you might find on the fenders of like a Panzer 3 or 4 or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And he's also really heavy into 3D printing. He's helped Tank Craft on a little bit and some of the other manufacturers with some CAD work. And Adam's agreed to be a guest on the show. So at some point in the coming year, we're going to get Adam on and talk about all this stuff. Because
I can't wait to listen to you two geek out over German track links and tool clamps.
What's your final one, Dave?
My final one is our friend Tom Balke Romanowski, who sent me basically a lighted radio type on air sign for us to take to shows so that when we're recording, we can turn it on and people will know that we're actually recording so they won't walk up to us and talk to us while we're in the middle of a recording session. Tom is one of the nicest human beings on the planet. He is an excellent modeler. I don't think he realizes how good a modeler he is. Tom was actually born in Poland pre the fall of the wall, pre the fall of the Soviet Union. So he grew up. He emigrated to the United States when he was 17, did a stint in the U.S. Army. And Tom has a really clear insight into life in the United States. And he's one of the nicer guys you'll ever meet modeling. I wish he would go to more contests because I would love to see him interact with more people. And it was really kind of him to send this thing. And I can guarantee you it will go with us to every contest where we're recording from now into the future.
That's some cool table bling. So thanks.
It is, man. Table bling. So, Mike, looks like we're at the end of the episode.
We are, Dave. And as we always say,
so many kids.
So little time, Dave. Take it easy, man.
We're going to be recording on Christmas.